So if you've invested in real estate long enough, you've probably been blindsided by a capital expenditure or two. That unexpected call from your tenant, my heat doesn't work, or my water tank just went, or my roof's leaking. And you're probably kicking yourself knowing, I fully knew that that was going to happen, or I should have done that earlier, or planned for it better. And that's ultimately the inevitable challenge of owning and investing in long-term real estate. That's what we're going to talk about here today. My name is Ryan Richards. I'm a residential loan officer and real estate investor based out of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. On this show, we talk all about real estate investing, business, and strategies you can actually implement to make changes in your life or in your business. And today I want to talk about a topic that's very relevant to me, something I'm going through across my portfolio right now, and that's repairs, maintenance, and capital expenditures. A lot of these things you can actually prepare for in your initial underwriting, when you actually acquire the property, and throughout the first few months of stabilization. So I want to share some of the things that I did, some of the things I could have done better to prepare for the inevitable. Stay tuned and we'll dive right in. So unfortunately, I hate to break it to you, but real estate is not entirely passive. Anytime you see an investor or an agent or someone in real estate post about real estate being passive, passive's almost always in quotations. And the reason is because there is an active role that you have to play in the stabilization, the maintenance, and the ongoing operations of the property. Aside from the tenants, whether they pay rent, don't pay rent, or create challenges, the main difficulty in managing and owning real estate is repairs, maintenance, vacancy, and everything that comes with keeping the property up and running. But there are a few things that you can do proactively to make sure that these issues don't catch you at the wrong time. And as I'm filming this right now, it's the first week of December 2025, and across my portfolio, I'm getting hit from almost every side with one or a multitude of these types of items. Thankfully, some things I planned for very well, and other things I probably could have planned for better. So here's a few recommendations that I would make to any investor who's either actively in the game or looking to get into real estate investing when it comes to preparing for these types of items. So when you're walking a property, before you're even making that offer, obviously you're looking at the systems, you're looking at the mechanicals. Is the water heater old? Is the furnace old? How's the roof? How's the siding? How's the foundation? What's the condition of the units? Has it been taken care of? You're trying to get a sense for what types of items you're going to have to repair or improve upon in the near future. Now, in an ideal world, you've included that in your underwriting, and hopefully you're able to address those items very quickly. My ideal acquisition includes some sort of renovation funding from the bank to not only improve the property immediately, but take care of a lot of those preventative maintenance items and even some of the bigger capital expenditures. Now, let me say, it's easy to say these types of things, but I'm in the process right now of replacing a combo boiler and hot water heater in my 6-unit building. So I have one heating system that does all of the heat for every apartment and does all of the hot water. Now, when I first took over the property, I knew that the system that was there was on the older side, but it really wasn't maintained. So I knew that in the near future, I was going to have to make probably a full replacement of that system. Now, the downside to replacing a unit that services the whole building is if that unit goes in the dead of winter, it's going to take a few days to get that up and running. But you have to get your tenants heat and hot water. So what do you do if that happens? Well, ideally, you avoid it. But I ended up putting myself in a position where I was fully prepared to make the improvement, had budgeted for it, had already multiple quotes in hand, contractors lined up, but I waited to pull the trigger and ended up finding myself in a position where I had to do this improvement in the middle of winter. Thankfully, because I had already started to get quotes, I already had contractors lined up, I already had my backup plan, space heaters ready for my tenants and other places where they can access hot water if they needed, it wasn't as bad as it probably could have been. But when you're preparing for a major replacement, like some sort of major system, roof replacement, siding replacement, you want to make sure you do it at the most opportune time. So, for example, if you're walking a property and you see that the heating systems are outdated, One, when you take over the property, I would start to get quotes from multiple contractors even well before you plan to do it. Allows you to pick your vendor, not be stressed, not have pressure to find someone who can do it in the next 2 weeks, but be proactive. So I started doing this for this particular building in June of 2025. Now, fast forward, at the end of November, I replaced the system. So 5 months before I ultimately actually made the replacement, I started the process. So I got quotes from a few different contractors. I started to fine tune my numbers, my renovation plan, like what did I want to put in, what type of system, and how it was all going to work. Now, ultimately, again, I waited a little bit too long. The system actually did fail, and I had to replace it very quickly. But I already had relationships with my vendors. I already had the plan already lined up. So it's just a matter of me giving them the green light to go ahead and replace the system. But in those initial 6 months building up to that day, I was able to redirect some of that cash flow from the property into a savings account to prepare for this expense. And replacing a boiler on a 6-unit building, that's a commercial system. It ultimately costs over $15,000. So if you're not ready for that with sufficient reserves, that could be a real challenge. Not to mention, if you then can't find a contractor who can come out and do it quickly for you, you might have to relocate your tenants. You can only go a day or two without having your tenants be able to shower with warm water and have heat. You might have to relocate them to a hotel or temporary housing until you get this fixed. And then what that also does is that ultimately prohibits your ability to think about a better business plan. So one thing I had done over those previous 6 months is right now I'm paying for all the heat. So I was looking at alternate options to outsource the heat payment to my tenants. So whether that be mini splits or looking at actually putting in individual boiler systems for all the units, I looked at a multitude of different options. But had I not started early, I wouldn't have had the time to really do that and give it my thorough thought. I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing that would give not only me the highest chance of recouping as much cash flow as possible, but also improving the value of the property as much as possible. So important to start early, be proactive, and not only budget for these types of things, but plan for them and actually take action. It's okay to replace a system before it actually fails. If you know it's going to fail imminently soon, your best bet 100% is to take control of that situation and do it on your own terms. When it's the most advantageous time of year, the most advantageous time for your contractors, do it on your terms. Don't wait for the property to tell you when to do things, because it puts you in a tough situation. Everyone's been there. If you own multiple properties or even just one building, something goes at a really unfortunate time. Maybe you're traveling and your tenant calls you and says, hey, my water heater is flooding the basement. Actual story that happened to me. Well, it's Sunday at 8 o'clock at night. You better have a pretty good Rolodex to be able to get someone out there at 8 p.m. at night to shut off the water, stop the flood, and replace the water heater. It goes back to having those systems, but be more proactive. I should have done that water tank probably a year ago. But like any landlord, I'm kicking the can, right? I don't want to spend money. I want to wait until I have to do things. But I would advise you not to do that. And that's something I'm really focusing on going forward, being so much more proactive with my portfolio. If there's deferred maintenance that's imminent, I'm taking care of it on my terms. When I want to do it, before something breaks, so you don't put yourself in a scramble situation. And not to mention, depending on the type of asset you're investing in, if you're buying, let's say, a 2 to 4 unit property, there are a lot of incentive programs that you can take advantage of. For example, if you're living in a multifamily property in Massachusetts, there's a Mass Save heat loan that you can get that will give you 0 interest financing to replace that system. But there's obviously more paperwork, there's more red tape. So if you wait until your system fails and you have to put in a new system in the dead of winter in 3 days, you're never going to be able to pull together that type of financing. There's also a lot of Mass Save heat incentives. If you're replacing or improving the energy efficiency of your property, there's a lot of rebates you can get, a lot of credits, especially on the smaller 2 to 4 unit properties. But again, if you don't do the homework up front, you'll never have time to actually coordinate this. And I know I just did this same thing in my property in Rhode Island. I replaced 32 windows in the building. Come to find out after the fact that there were probably some rebate programs I could have taken advantage of. Granted, I'd like to think I got a really good deal on my windows, so I'm not really upset about it, but these types of things are super important to start early. And there's even things you can do before you buy the property. Keep in mind, it's often a lot easier to get renovation funding from the bank at time of acquisition, like before you actually close on the property, going to the bank and asking for a line of credit to do renovations, or a renovation loan where there's some draw advances for you to use to do these renovations. That's typically a lot easier at the time of acquisition versus after the fact. Not to mention, you'll probably pay more closing costs if you have to close another loan after you just closed on the purchase. So being proactive, taking a vigilant walkthrough of the property at the time you purchase it, and once you actually take over ownership. That's something I do on all of my buildings now. Few things that I'll do every single time. And these are a function of, again, some of these stories I just shared with you, things I didn't do the best that I possibly could. But that's life. You refine your systems, you continue to improve, and you find ways to be better. When I take over a building now, on closing day, I'm walking through the entire building, really focusing on the basement. Are there water shutoffs individually for every unit? If my tenant calls me and said her shower's flooding, can I shut off the water without shutting off the main for the whole building? If not, something I want my plumber to install. Not only will I do that, but I'll actually take a video of starting at the basement of me showing a potential tenant how to shut off their own water. Because I just had this happen. As I mentioned in my story a moment ago, I was traveling in a different country. My tenant called me and said the basement's flooding because my hot water heater broke. Well, at the rate this water was flowing, even if it took a plumber 30 minutes to get over there, which is a very fast response time, my whole basement would be flooded. But because I actually had this type of information documented, I sent them the video and said, hey, can you please go in the basement and shut off the water? Here's a video of how to do it. It's 30 seconds. You'll be able to do it, no problem. They went down there, followed the instructions, shut the water off. So again, it's these little system improvements that really can make property management a lot easier. So walk the basements, I look for water shutoffs, and I take those videos. Another thing is I'll take videos from my tenants on how to shut off or access the electric panel. Not something you really necessarily always want a tenant to do, but that call you get that your tenant popped a breaker. Hey, my lights in my kitchen shut off. Well, were you running the electric stove and the microwave at the same time? Yes. Okay, your breaker probably popped. Here, check out this video, go into the basement, and look for one of the switches that's going the wrong way, and pop it the other way. That saved a maintenance call, saved an hourly fee to a handyman, just to go out there and flip a switch to a breaker. So if you're going to self-manage, you need to be efficient, because some of my properties are over an hour away from me. I can't drive 2.5 hours to go switch on a breaker. So I need to be able to inform my tenants on how to make these types of quick decisions. And the third thing I'll do is I'll walk the systems. Like, let me take a look at the water heaters, look at the furnaces or the boilers, and have my contractor give me their opinion. What do you think is the useful life on this particular piece of equipment? How many years do you think I have until it's replaced? I'll have them go through it, give it a tune-up, and give me their expectation. Well, right now, it's a boiler. It's about 15 to 20 years old, but it's gas. It's been maintained really well. I think you could get 25 or even 30 years out of it. Perfect. Not something I'm going to touch now. But for example, that boiler on my 6 unit, that was something that the second we walked the property, that I confirmed after with my HVAC technician, that unit was about 12 years old, which is not old, but it was not maintained. So it was already showing signs of significant potential for failure. So then that prompted me to budget for the expense, direct some of that cash flow into a savings account, start to get quotes, make a plan, and ultimately my big miss was just not pulling the trigger sooner. Thankfully I got it done, but it could have been much more streamlined had I not waited until the end. So walk the basement, check for those water shutoffs, give your tenants some easy information to access to maybe get to a water shutoff or get to an electric panel, and then budget for these types of expenditures. Walk through your systems. If you don't know what you're doing, then find a contractor. Find a trusted HVAC tech or a plumber to walk through these systems with you and give you their opinion. And that way you can budget accordingly and be much more efficient when these types of items come up. As always, if you have questions about multifamily investing, reach out to me. I'm happy to hop on a call or direct you to the Informed Investor. We host quarterly seminars throughout New England geared towards simplifying the real estate process. How can we help as many people as possible get into multifamily investing and do it confidently? As always, thanks for watching.